Hi, I'm Jenna. I'm from Lincolnshire and I've got experience with long COVID. I caught COVID in September 2020. Before we were all entitled to our boosters and jabs, and also before even lateral flares existed. So it was still quite an unknown at that point. But when I caught it, it was a big surprise because I didn't actually have any of the symptoms listed on the NHS website. So when I first caught COVID, I didn't have typical symptoms, so therefore didn't actually think I was entitled to a COVID test. I looked like I had chickenpox, or at least a full body rash, and did feel generally rubbish. And I was at home, but only because the doctor wasn't certain if I had chickenpox or not. So asked me to stay away from children and young people and vulnerable people, which I couldn't do in my area of work. So I stayed at home, and it's only when I was at home that my symptoms began to change. And I noticed that how did my spots turn into a really sore throat? And my really sore throat didn't seem to go anywhere or change. And then I had a really bad headache. It's only because I knew of people who had started to get COVID more commonly, because obviously in the first lockdown, actually everyone I knew, no one had COVID. It was kind of a bit unknown, really. It was something we watched in the news, but not actually something we knew anyone had first-hand experience of. So I spoke to my husband, who was working away at the time, and said, I'm going to go for a COVID test. He was like, really? I don't think you need one. I was like, well, I think I need to before I go back to work. I think it's sensible. So I went for the COVID test on the Sunday morning, and it was the time when everyone was having COVID tests, so the wait was really long for results. So I stayed at home with my children for the next couple of days waiting for my results, and I couldn't understand how I was incapable of doing anything really that was normal functioning. And I was desperately trying to go back to work, telling people I'll be back tomorrow. As soon as my results in, I'll be back. But I couldn't even stand up, if I'm honest. My young daughter at the time was doing a lot of things for me. Had horrendous pain across my stomach that was very, very hard to describe. And it just seemed to escalate. And actually, when I got the result of having COVID, I was relieved because they explained how ill I was. And then obviously I did the isolation and, seemed to be improving a tiny bit, but not able to do anything in the house. Couldn't even walk down the stairs. And it's only when it got to about 4 weeks later and I was trying to function to go back to work, and I literally tried to do a couple of hours from home the first day, and I felt like I'd got COVID all over again, as if I'd restarted the clock, and I could not explain why that had happened. And I carried on battling through, and again it got to another about 4 weeks later, and I contacted the doctor and went, something's wrong, something's not right, I don't feel well. And nothing could really pinpoint why I couldn't. The symptoms were really strange, and it was just, now what I know now, it was chronic fatigue, but I just didn't know that. And they just kept saying, oh, still early days, take it easy. And I found that really frustrating. I had the typical blood work done, and this saw me and did the typical tests. Everything was tick box normal. Well, I can tell you now, I felt the furthest from normal I've ever felt in my life. And again, I carried on trying to rest and, take it easy. And then again, Christmas came, Christmas went, and I tried to go again from home, doing a bit of work from home. And again, was just getting worse and worse. And at this point is when in the press, they were talking about long COVID and what long COVID was. And there was big adverts from, politicians telling me about these wonderful long COVID clinics that you could go to and they're going to change your life. And I was like, I need to get one of them. And I'm quite a determined person. And I was not going to say no for an answer because I wanted my life back. So I contacted my doctor and said, I've heard about these long COVID clinics and it's only just been talked about in Lincolnshire and starting. So he did refer me. He was excellent, referred me straight away. But Lincolnshire at the time had a very simple long COVID service. It was a few professionals working together to try and start helping people, but it was no way what was advertised on the telly. So I got my assessment phone call, and I remember trying to put into words how ill I had become. And it was really difficult because I didn't have brain fog. I was very articulate. I could explain how I was feeling. So to anyone who could hear me on a phone call would think nothing was wrong with me. What they didn't see was as soon as I stopped talking, my inability to function. And I mean, as in simple as lift your head off a pillow, I couldn't do it because I'd worn myself out so much. So he, said, someone would contact me, and I found out a bit more, and I was desperate. I checked my emails, obviously, almost constantly waiting for some answers. And I did get one. It was basically I was going to be put on the pathway through the app. And I was thinking, I know myself too well. That's not going to work. I've got myself far too ill. I need help, and fast. So I did contact them back and say, I don't know if you quite understand what I've gone from doing to what I'm able to do now. And amazingly, at the time, the manager of the service contacted me and she said, yeah, I agree with you. I'll get somebody to phone you. So I spoke to somebody on the phone who, again, was floored by how ill I had become, and said I did need some serious help. And I was very lucky that they agreed to refer my case again that afternoon to their multidisciplinary team. And at that point, the chronic fatigue service had come on board. And luckily, my case was heard that day, and the chronic fatigue service agreed to take up my case and work with me. And it was only at that point, which was 6 months into being ill, that I actually felt someone was listening to me and could offer some support. And at that point was a turning point, but it took a long time to get there. And it was because of perseverance that I was determined not to allow myself to be stuck in that rut forever. Because I really did feel at one point I was never ever going to be really able to leave the house again. For me, it was the fact that my head felt like it was attached to somebody else's body. My mind, my brain, everything was telling me I should do everything I would normally do. But everything from the neck down just didn't seem to work anymore. So doing anything would cause me to just, I could feel, it's hard to describe, but it felt like someone was pressing on me, like pressure all the time, like pushing me down, like weighing me down. Like you were walking through treacle is how I'd best describe it. That my brain would like, well, go on then, get up and do that. And my body would go, you've got to be kidding me. You want to walk to the toilet, which is 3 steps away? No way. And I just kept getting this horrendous pain in my diaphragm area. There wasn't necessarily stomach ache or and then because I had this pain so badly it made me be sick because the pain just didn't seem to go away. And it just was like I was being crushed underneath the weight of my own body. But my head was off doing its normal life, thinking its normal thoughts. And it wasn't until I learned about the illness that I realised that my mind working in the overdrive that it was working, wanting to fix everything, wanting to do everything as normal, that I was making myself worse. I needed to take a pause and go, no, we need downtime. That means mind downtime as well. And that's what I think was my biggest stumbling block, is the fact that my mind continued to be active and my body couldn't be. For me, it was the fact that I wasn't being the mum to my 2 children that I should be, because I was just incapable of looking after them myself. I had to rely on my parents. My husband had recently started his own business, so him not going to work was not an option. And I just couldn't do it. So I had to rely on my parents being here as soon as my husband was going to work, and basically being here and almost until he got home from work. I remember one particular day where they said, are you okay for us to go? And I was like, yeah, I'll be fine. All I have to do is put the kids to bed. That's all I had to do, was literally, get up the stairs. They were capable of getting in bed, having a quick story. Well, I didn't make it to the top of the stairs. I was in a heap on top of the stairs on the floor. and looking at my 6-year-old at the time, who was begging for my phone to ring an ambulance and call for help, because we had to teach her that's what she had to do, it destroyed me. Because she begged me within an inch of my life that she could phone for help, and I wouldn't let her. I just had to ask my children to help me get to bed, and then say to them, please go and get in bed and close your eyes and go to sleep. Daddy will be home soon. And at that point I went, this is not right. I was really lucky that the support network around me was amazing, and everyone was prepared to listen, because it's one of those things where, unless you know me really well, as I say, you could have come to my front door and I would have talked to you like normal, and then I would have been literally a mess within 2 seconds afterwards. But I would have always put on the brave face and gone, oh, try my best, doing well. Only the people who saw me every day, my husband and my parents, my mother-in-law, who looked and said, I can't believe how ill you've got. So that was tricky, but they would always listen, and they would always just let me talk and say how I was feeling at the time, or this has gone really well, or this has gone terribly. I've been trying this and it's just not worked today. And I think without that, it would have been a really lonely place. I also did manage to get connections with some other people who were also suffering from long COVID. To be honest with you, I've never met them before in my life, really. They just had a friend of a friend, who said, oh, I know you've talked about being ill, Jenna. Do you mind speaking to this person? I'm like, no, of course I don't. And we kind of built a bit of our own network, really, of, I'm really struggling with this today. Are you? And they'd be like, yeah, oh yeah, I had that last week, I tried this. And that helped. Just somebody who understood what you were trying to explain. Because I found it hard some days to explain what was wrong with me today, because it was a new symptom, and surely it can't be a different symptom. You've already had about 35. What's going on? And that's when it seemed ridiculous. And it's only because people I knew had similar experiences that I felt that actually, oh no, I wasn't cracking up or losing my mind, because that crosses your mind. You think, is it in my head? Is this a real thing? No test results say anything's wrong with me. So maybe it is in my head. And you do go through that process too. And that's hard, especially when you're not seeing improvements, which at the beginning I wasn't. And it wasn't until I would say the June time following the September being ill that I started to notice some things were getting better. Yeah. So I found that my children took it the hardest and asked every day, has COVID gone now? Have you got rid of COVID now? Because at this point, obviously, life started to go back to normal a little bit for them. But for me, it hadn't. So they were at school as normal and, going out with other people and having a nice time, and mummy couldn't go. And they did ask a lot, as if, like they would have got medicine. When they've been ill, they've got medicine from the doctor and they've got better. And they didn't understand why I wasn't getting better, and kept asking, when can we do this? And I just didn't have an answer for them. My husband obviously found it exhausting, because then he took on full responsibility of everything. And without my parents being here literally every day to take care of the house, I wouldn't have been able to do it. So I always felt for other people who are in a position where they just couldn't have help, because I was lucky to have had help. And that did make a massive difference to my recovery. And without that, it would have been impossible. For me, I wish I'd have known what I know now. And I always say that. And I was only literally talking to my husband about yesterday. If I'd have known what I knew 6 months into it, I think I would have spent the first 6 months not making myself worse, which is what I truly believe I did, because I just kept thinking, battle on, push through it. Thinking about the way you might have dealt with a cold or a sickness bug, you just got to get up and get going. Your body will catch up and it'll reset. Well, mine was so on the floor, there was no point of resetting it. So I wish I'd have known not to try and push through and push past it, and that actually these symptoms that I was experiencing were real, and that actually they could be managed. I think the biggest thing I've learned throughout this is what my body is telling me. And also learning that everyone's experience of long COVID is so vastly different. And what is right for one person will definitely not be right for the next. So it's about learning what your body is telling you. So my body was really telling me, stop, pack it in, it's had enough. And I wish I had just gone, okay, it's had enough, let's just give in now. But I have learned a lot about things that my body's maybe been telling me for years. Little signs. I've never been unwell particularly, but I had little signs that maybe my body was getting tired. And I never noticed them, but now I know what they are instantly. I get little symptoms now that I know are telltale signs that I'm getting fatigued. So my face never gets red, but it feels like from the inside out it's burning. That's the number one sign that I'm getting really, really tired and I need to just stop. But I've never listened to that before, but now I will. The biggest driver and the biggest change for me was working with chronic fatigue service, working with Lindsay, because one thing she done the first time I met her, it was a long conversation for about an hour online. She gave me the permission to be ill. She sat there and went, yeah, you're really unwell now and you're allowed to be. And I think that was my turning point, because I broke down and went, oh, thank goodness, I'm allowed to be ill now. And it wasn't until I hit the bottom first that I could go back up. Actually working through all the little things that had been affecting my life, starting with sleep, because I had none. I was tired all the time, but yet was having very, very little quality deep sleep. So Lindsay helped me fix that. And then we worked through every single thing in turn, all the way up to nutrition being one of the, final points. But slowly but surely drip feeding this information. Not all at once, because I am a person who would have gone from 0 to 100 within 3 days. And she sussed me out straight away. And she said, no way, Jose, I've got the reins on you. This is what we're doing first, and you're not allowed to do anything else. And I needed somebody to say that. And without that, it wouldn't have worked for me. And it was very much so I was very lucky to have one-to-one support for about 8 weeks, possibly longer. And then I did a group support with the same process. And when we started the group support, I felt I had light bulb moments. That everything I've been sort of working on myself for a couple of months, now was starting to, I could see the progress in them. And actually hearing the information again, returning to it and hearing it really did change everything for me. And I was like, oh, wow, I really understand this now. I understand what post-external malaise is, because everyone kept saying those words to me and I'm going, no idea what that is. They're just words. I've done my research and it's still just words. It means nothing to me personally, until all of a sudden I went, oh, I've got it. And everyone said about boom and bust. You're having boom and bust days. I'm doing what? And it's now I found like I pass that information on to other people, even with not just illnesses related to COVID, other illnesses, and saying, I can see what you're doing. You're doing exactly what I did wrong. So please stop. So that was for me the biggest difference. And I feel very lucky that I got offered that support. Tricky question. Probably myself, if I'm really honest, because the knowledge that's out there that you can get hold of, and there is a lot, when you want to find it, and I did, can actually be detrimental to you because you don't understand what it really means. And I think that was where I was going wrong. I was reading I knew all these words. I knew all this NHS jargon. I'd read it all. But actually what it meant in reality and what it meant to me personally was very different. And I think that's where things were going wrong. And I also felt at the beginning, because I didn't have anyone to actually acknowledge that I was that ill. And everyone kept saying, oh, you'll be better soon. And I got to a stage where I couldn't start. If anyone had said it to me, I think I'd have lost it. I felt like going, you've got no idea. No, I'm not going to be better soon. I know I'm not. So that became a big barrier. And it wasn't until, as I say, I heard somebody say back to me, "You are very poorly now," that I was like, right, okay, yes, we've got something to really fix. So I would say that's the biggest barrier. I think the biggest improvement that's come throughout people learning about long COVID is that there is a lot better access to support now, and that support is quicker. And that's the only thing I wish I'd have had, something a little bit quicker, because I don't think I would have been as ill for as long as I was. So I think the biggest thing we've always talked about is obviously having someone to speak to who knows what you're talking about. And that's the part that we've been desperate to set up and make sure is there, because that is what I felt made the difference to me. Someone who understood when I said about this weird pain or this weird sensation I've now got in my nose that I didn't understand. Someone else went, yeah, I've had that. I know what that is. And you go, okay, great, brilliant. That's normal then. That's what I think we need to make sure is definitely out there for people. Someone who is prepared to sit there and go, yeah, I get it. And it's rubbish and it's horrible and it does change your life. But it's going to be rubbish for a while. And I can't tell you when it's going to get better, but I can offer you a little bit of hope. So that's where I feel we've got the biggest driving point. We've got people who are experts in that field now. You know, they are the patients who have lived it. And we've got a really good pool of people who are prepared to say, yes, I'll listen. Because that's what you need, someone to listen. Interestingly, I had this experience not so long back with one of my friend's husbands, who told me he was experiencing long COVID. And I said, what support have you had? And he said, none. I was like, whoa, hang on, stop. Tell me what you're doing. And he explained his days to me. And I was horrified because he explained everything that was wrong with long COVID and how you make yourself worse. And he was doing the typical, I feel a bit better today, I'll get this done. And so he goes and does this, and then he's in bed for 3 days. So I was trying to explain how you have to start off with finding your baseline of what your body can tolerate with levels of either exercise or mental stimulation or whatever it is. And what I mean by exercise is just general moving around the house. I'm not talking about any running or anything like that, just general movement. And actually building that from that baseline and only ever adding 10% at a time over a long period of time. So without finding that baseline of knowing what your body can tolerate without how you having a massive repercussion of symptoms, that's the biggest telling point. So when I first looked for my own baseline, it was really low, much lower than I ever thought it could be. So I think that's what I would tell people, that actually, what are you able to do physically, mentally, without having any repercussions of symptoms? And then really think about that as a whole day, because I could manage very little. And that's when the reality hit. So I think that's what I would explain to people. That you're allowed to give in to being as ill as you feel. And it's not always about proving that you can do it, and they will get better. If you'd have told me even a year ago today that I would be working my normal job, enjoying my life with my children, going out on days out, going on holiday, I would have laughed in your face, because I could barely, by this point, even just manage a day at home with the children, never mind anything else. And I couldn't consider going back to work. So it will get better, but you've got to work at it. It's almost a job getting better in itself, and it needs 100% commitment. Please listen to the patient. This is not a tick box illness. They are not going to come to you with a perfect fit like the NHS originally was with COVID. You know, you're going to have a temperature, you're going to have loss of taste and smell, you're going to have a cough. I didn't. Throughout the whole of my illness, did have I any of those things. I did have a funny smell, but that was well into it. And with long COVID, it's the same. Not everyone is going to have the same list of things that are the biggest concern to them. I still thank myself lucky that I didn't have brain fog. I know a lot of people who do, and it's massively affecting their daily life. From simple things to, I can't remember what the item's called because that part of my brain is just not working properly. So please don't fill it. There's going to be a typical tick list. They're not going to fill it. You need to listen to what they need and what they're telling you. And it may not be the perfect fit for that service, but maybe, just maybe, another service that can be. The one thing I would say about hope is you do lose it. When you're ill, you do lose sight of any hope or any, I'll do this soon, because you think I won't be able to do anything soon. But what I would like to say to people is there is hope. I truly am mostly better. I live my life normally. I do have to watch my own signs and symptoms in my body now, which I have learnt, and I can't tell you what yours are because I'm not you. But do learn them and do listen to them, because when you get to a stage of breaking through and getting your life back, there is hope.